You're listening to Design Between the Lines, the only design and home furnishings podcast where we talk with the movers and shakers, industry innovators, and lifetime legends of the home furnishings industry. It's here that I get a chance to sit and chat with the influencers shaping the industry into what it is today. Interior and home furnishings designer Ashley Hicks has designed architecture and interiors in UK, Europe, and the United States, mixing private residential projects with larger scale commercial work. In 1997, Ashley designed his first furniture collection, an interpretation of the ancient Greek klizmos chair. He has achieved significant success with his fabric, carpet, and wallpaper designs. An avid writer, Ashley has published many books, including a personal memoir of his father, the famed interior designer David Hicks, followed by a definitive review of his father's career and life. He is also a contributing editor to Cabana magazine. Did I say that correctly?
Cabana
or Cabana?
Cabana.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Ashley is in town for the High Point Market, and I got a chance to chat with him about his career and his father's legacy. Ashley, welcome.
Thank you.
Easy question to start with. What was it like growing up surrounded by great interior design, by interest and passion for interior design in the home you grew up in?
That's an easy question. I mean, it's an easy question. It's a very long answer, but I'll make it short probably. But it was very all encompassing. You can imagine every single detail of each of our various homes, because we had a country house in Oxfordshire, which was our main home, then a house in London, and then a couple of holiday houses, one in the Bahamas, and one in the south of France.
Both good locations for holiday.
So, and every detail of these, of course, was designed, and also, the cars. At one stage my father had to sell his Rolls Royce, which had been, custom made in chocolate brown, with a chauffeur's uniform, obviously in chocolate brown to match.
Oh my gosh.
And he had to sell this. And so his response, as an economy measure, and so as a response to the economy measure, he had two Peugeot sort of mid-sized saloon cars specially made at the Peugeot factory in France with black felt seating and gold H logos
as an economy measure
on the doors. Yes, this was supposed to be an economy measure, and obviously these two custom-made Peugeots cost at least as much as a new Rolls Royce would have done. But
Well, did this growing this up like this with these influences in your life? I'm sure it gave you a passion, but did that influence your style, or did you kind of work on your own style kind of from there? I mean, I wonder.
Well, it's a mixture, I suppose. Growing up with this visually obsessive, and tremendously sort of kind of rigorous, really, environment where every single surface and every aspect of every room and every space is meticulously considered.
Mm-hmm.
To the extent of my father creating all these tablescapes, and he was very proud of contributing the word tablescape to the English language, which, of course, what he meant by it was groups of objects assembled in an aesthetic manner on a side table.
Wow.
in a living room, in a reception room. And some people now use the term to describe, the setting of a table, a dining table, which is quite wrong, and he'd be horrified to think that his word was being abused like this. But you can imagine, these tablescapes where you've got, precious and not so precious objects, but arranged in very meticulous patterns, and they're all lined up, and they're all perfectly symmetrical and perfectly straight, and it's
Wow.
very, very careful. It's like a sculpture, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not fixed together. And of course, if you're a child, all you want to do is to touch all these pretty objects and move them around.
Yes,
and so
do.
we were always told, those are daddy's toys. Yours are in the nursery. I didn't come up there and play with your toys. You shouldn't play with mine down here.
Oh, gosh.
So you can imagine, and the root of all of this sort of obsessive thing of his, was when he was a kid and living in a small village in the English countryside during the Second World War, and a sort of, rather design-conscious lady moves into the house across the street. And so he and his mother, who live alone, you see, in the house, are peering through the curtains at endless removals vans arriving with all these crates of furniture and pictures and objects. And so over weeks, the house is put together, and finally they're invited for a drink to meet the new neighbor. And they go in, and he said it was extraordinary. It was as if there was a magic spell had been put on the house. And there were all these objects arranged in these careful patterns on the tables, and all of the furniture was in very specific positions. And you felt as if you moved anything, the spell might be broken. Yeah. And it felt rather intimidating, but rather exciting.
So this was his moment, I guess you could say.
This was his, yeah.
Now, did you have any early, beyond your father, did you have any early mentors in your life that directed you, or meeting them might have? Well, that's me and my nice ring there. Did anybody that you met in your lifetime that kind of helped in your direction?
Well, I suppose various people, but the other strong influence when I was a kid was like my grandfather, Lord Mountbatten, who'd been the last Viceroy of India and, was a cousin of the royal family.
Very famous.
All the royal families of Europe, in fact, and he used to tell us stories when we were kids of his childhood. And so he, as a, 14-year-old child, was with his mother visiting his two aunts in Russia. And so one of his aunts was the Grand Duchess Sergei, who was, her husband was the governor of Moscow and was the uncle of the then Tsar, the Emperor, Nicholas II, the one who was murdered by the Bolsheviks in 1917. And that was my grandfather's other uncle, you see. And so as a kid, he's in Russia and traveling on the imperial train.
Huh.
Alone with his mother on the imperial train, going from one palace to another.
Wow.
And as a boy, he's 14 years old. And he's a curious young man, so he's walking along the corridor of the train, and he hears a tapping noise, and so he goes in, and there's a peasant carpenter who's kneeling over a toilet seat and nailing fresh chamois leather onto this toilet seat. Very luxuriously appointed bathroom. Yeah. And so my grandfather, curious boy, says, what are you doing? And the man says, oh, this is Her Imperial Majesty's bathroom. Wow. And I'm changing the leather on her seat. My grandfather says, but my aunt isn't on the train. And he said, oh, no, when she is on the train, then I'm in my workshop, and if she uses the bathroom, a light comes on in my workshop, and I come in and change the leather.
Wow.
So there was a bottom that never sat on anything except for fresh chamois leather.
That is extraordinary. What a story.
But anyway, but our grandfather, would tell us stories like this of great luxury and, and a design consciousness, let's face it, there. Yeah. And also was very, very conscious of design himself.
Okay. And, so you got that naturally. He really did.
A little, I was kind of surrounded by it. And he was very image conscious, and he would have me do little tasks for him, like draw his coat of arms to be embroidered onto a new set of slippers for him, or restore the paintwork on his coat of arms on his flag. Wow. He liked to fly a flag with his coat of arms on it over his castle.
Gosh. Well, how did you get from growing up like this to starting your own practice, should I say?
Well, I then, slightly reacted against all this and went off to art school. And so I was a sort of an anti-nuclear protesting art student as a kid. Okay. And then went on to architecture school. And so started to become an architect at the Architectural Association in London, which is a great sort of modern architecture school. Mm-hmm. And then leaving there, went to work for architects. I worked for Peter Panoyer in New York for a while, and then worked with somebody in London, and then opened my own practice. But after 2-3 years, realized really that I was more of an interior designer than an architect, and so stopped being an architect. But in between the two, worked for a few months with my father. And so I was his sort of architect partner, and did some interior schemes with him on his behalf.
That's very interesting.
Which was interesting.
I bet it was.
Yeah. It was, unfortunately, it was towards the end of his designing career, really, and he was he was no longer quite as professional as he had been when he was younger.
Okay.
And so it led to a few situations, let's say.
I can understand that.
But I did get some insight into his working methods then. And he always, while we were growing up, my sisters and I, he very much, and he had a rather old-fashioned sort of Victorian attitude to women, I suppose, and he thought of my sisters as, nice young ladies who would marry dukes and live in castles and palaces and never work, whereas I would be the one who would work. And so he made me the heir to his design legacy. But he also, while I was a child, he would make me look at his scrapbooks, which are what I've just published a re-edition of.
Which is what you were just here earlier signing the books.
Exactly.
Beautiful, beautiful book. Lots of collections and wonderful. I'm sure brought many interesting thoughts back to you as you put the thing together. What an amazing book. Everyone should take a look at that. And the name of the book is?
David Hicks Scrapbooks.
There you go.
Yeah.
Please go out, look for it, and buy it. Well, Ashley, I'm kind of interested in your design process, but before that, let me ask a little bit about how the first furniture collection you developed came about. Can you tell me a little about that?
Yeah, it actually came about because I was an architect in partnership with another architect in London, which was not going well.
Oh, okay.
And unfortunately, this guy, had said to me that he was very good at managing an office, managing a business, and doing the logistics, and he would do all that, leaving me to be the creative one. And unfortunately, the moment we signed the paper, he suddenly realized that he wanted to be a creative one too. And so we suddenly had two creatives, nobody to do the business. Absolute nightmare, as you can imagine.
Yeah,
Everything went horribly wrong. And anyway, in order to get out of that, really, I started doing furniture. And when I'd been at the Architectural Association, starting to become an architect and forced to do very, very modern, very sort of avant-garde architectural, styles, which don't come that naturally to me. I like to have a lot of historical influences, and the modernist ethos of that school was very strong. So I used to spend a lot of time in the library looking at old books, and I found a wonderful book of classical Greek furniture, ancient Greek furniture designs, from a book published in the late 1920s, and it contained a measured drawing for a Greek klizmos chair. And the klizmos chair, klini in ancient Greek is to recline. That's where the word to recline comes from. And so the klizmos is the easy chair of ancient Greece. There was a thronos, a throne, which had a straight back, and the klizmos had an angled back. And so I was very captivated by this design. And I had a friend in India who I'd gone to India, to Jaipur, to work on an architectural project that never materialized, but what did materialize was a great friendship with this man called Munu Kasliwal of the Gem Palace Jewelry Store in Jaipur.
Wow.
And so we became great friends, and so there with him, I said to him, do you know anyone who could produce this ancient Greek chair for me? He said, they're all thieves. And my children get very cross if I imitate an Indian accent because it's considered racist today, which I don't see why. But they're all thieves. Tomorrow morning you'll see it in Habitat. All the cheap stores in London, they'll be full of it. Don't do it. But I've got carpenters upstairs mending Mummy's bedside table. So anyway, I started making this ancient Greek chair with these modern Indian carpenters who were all from villages in the desert area where Alexander the Great's armies had got as far as, thousands of years before. So it was rather fascinating that they were using the same tools as ancient Greek carpenters used to use.
I think that's
and working in the same way.
Yeah. That's
for
awesome.
For what it's worth.
Well,
anyway, it was a sort of a distraction, really. But I then started making much more modern pieces of furniture, but still inspired by classical forms and very much informed by the curves, sort of sensual curves of that klizmos chair. And so I've done these cast aluminium parts for furniture, which I shape by hand, and then I have them cast, and they have these sort of sexy curves, and I like using those.
Wow, I'm just thinking out loud that First of all, what historical base? You're sitting there and all of this history is upon you when you're actually creating the first pieces you did, and now you're adding the modern tone to the classical, a great combination, might add. You went now into recently carpets, fabrics, wallpapers. You love patterns, I would take it?
I do. I mean, the carpets and fabrics and everything really started when my father died. Mm-hmm. And very quickly after he died, people were fascinated and obsessed, and I had always been, the sort of high priest of his cult, really, at home. Yeah. I was the child who was always looking at the scrapbooks and reminding him of the names of his various clients over the years and this kind of thing. So I did know him sort of inside out. Uh-huh. And he left instructions for his funeral. That was the first stage of this, really, where his instructions for his funeral, where he wanted very specific things made for his funeral, a coffin specially made, lined in his fabric, specially printed, all this kind of thing. Wow. And so putting that together and then moving on into creating a fabric collection with Kravitt, Lee Jofa, was a sort of natural progression. And so I did a book on him quite soon after he died, with a foreword by Tom Ford, who was at the time the chief designer at Gucci and had sort of reinvented Gucci, and was a great admirer of my pa's design, and indeed used some of his designs in one of the collections for Gucci. And so as a sort of punishment, I made him write the foreword for this book.
Oh, nice of you to do that.
Yes, well, it was nice of him to do.
Yeah. Here's a question. We've got furniture, and we talked about the development, your process coming up with the first collection, and the basis in history and historical design. How is the development of design for textured things, colored things like carpets and fabrics and wallpaper? How is that different in the process, or is it a similar process for you to develop products in those category of goods?
Well, to furniture.
From furniture, you kind of moved into these other.
Oh, totally different. I mean, furniture, is a three-dimensional thing that you've got to sit on. It's got to support weight. It's got to, it has meanings that are far and beyond any fabric or carpet. Fabrics and carpets are surfaces. Yeah. They almost never have any real sort of emotional meaning or physical presence. They're a surface. Whereas a piece of furniture is a quite different thing, and there are many different factors at play, and also so many. Surface patterns also have a lot of historical archetypes that you're relating to or not relating to. Right. But furniture very much so, And also furniture, the thing of furniture is that the scale is, it's always a one-to-one scale in a way. It's always related to the scale of the body. Yes. And so you're always, a chair leg, it's a leg, We have legs, chairs have legs. Chairs have arms, we have arms. So they're very, they're related to the human body in a very direct way, which fabrics and carpets absolutely aren't.
True.
And so as a result, I suppose that the design process is a very different one. In furniture, quite often there's a sort of a modeling to the form.
And you were talking earlier about the curves that you
exactly, and I like to make these patterns for casting myself, and so I take some wood or some clay and model, sculpt a form and then have it cast, which is a nice sort of direct way of
very tactile way
of working, and then obviously fabric is quite different, although in a similar way. My own fabrics, because I do my own Textures by Ashley Hicks, which is a collection of printed linens, which are my own brand, as opposed to my general ones, which are David Hicks by Ashley Hicks. And so my Textures ones are mainly historical patterns, a few new ones that I've just sort of created, but they're all drawn by hand by me. And so instead of having an idea or cutting out an old pattern or something and giving it to some artist to draw up or doing it all on a computer, then I actually draw the thing myself. So I like having the sort of handmade mark.
And you're going until you're satisfied with what you like, what you've drawn.
Absolutely.
Well, good for you. That's writing books.
Yes.
Now you're an author many times over. Is that something, writing, that you really enjoy doing? I would think it is. I mean,
I do. No, I love it. I've never written fiction. I started once to write some fiction.
Yeah.
Yes. And I gave my first few chapters of this rather eccentric thriller that I was writing, to a famous London agent, literary agent, who's now dead, but while he was still alive, I gave him this thing, and he sent it back to me with a very short thing saying, "I'm going to give you the second best answer in the whole world, a quick no." So that was the end of my novel writing attempt.
Okay.
But writing about design I very much enjoy, and I do write for Cabana magazine and other magazines.
And do you enjoy that, the short form?
Father.
Do you like the short form for magazines, writing like in more of a short form?
Yes,
no,
it's nice to write concisely. It is, and I enjoy writing my little Instagram captions. In fact, Instagram's a marvelous thing because you can write so little that people actually read them.
I hear you're famous for those captions. That's what I hear. At least your sister says that. You're famous for those captions. Now, I'm going to have to start reading them. It sounds like you have a wealth of great humor, I must say. Publishing details. Now, that was can you tell me a little bit about publishing that?
Yeah, well, that actually came from my Instagram, more or less, because it's Details was a book I did with combining my photographs of historic interiors, many of them taken just with my phone, going around houses open to the public or old churches, museums, and I snap pictures with my phone. And you can actually now, using Photoshop, produce a book with pictures from an iPhone, and they look pretty good, if you ask me. And so it's a combination of those and then my own photographs of my own interiors. So it's rather a pretentious proposition, really, because I've got sort of a great architect, Sir John Soane, his library in London facing a library I've designed.
Oh my!
So I'm not sure really what one would think of that. It's not very modest. But it's.
I think you've done very well with that. And look where you're across the street. That's pretty good. That's pretty pretentious. I like that. Current trends in the industry. Now I'm going to ask from the UK perspective. Maybe there's a world perspective to that. And I know you travel a lot. I mean, do you have a notion for current trends that you see that are I guess affecting you, or you're saying, my goodness, I've just seen this and I wonder that seems to be a trend to you?
I don't know that I have really noticed anything particularly, but I suppose what you see quite a lot of is this sort of random geometric designs. So there is a certain amount of that. But I think what's exciting about the design world now is that it is so, what in England we call Catholic. It's so embracing of just about everything, and so we're no longer ruled by the sort of, dominance of minimalism or by the endless sort of neoclassical, postmodernist thing. And instead, really, you can let it all hang out. People do one thing, people do another thing, and everything has a similar value. And there is no sort of heterodoxy, I suppose.
My sense of it is you like that. You're glad to see that.
I am, yes. I think that's good.
Good deal.
My father was always apt to say, that people had very bad taste, and things were bad taste, and he quite often he'd say that, your aunt, he would say, has no taste whatsoever, and I, of course, being a cheeky child, would say, actually, I think you're wrong. I think she's got lots of taste. It's just all of it what you would think of as bad, but essentially, actually, it's different from yours. And I don't think there is really good taste and bad taste. It's just some people, have
the eye of the beholder, I guess.
The eye of the beholder, indeed. But we're living in an age without rules, I think. Where,
I agree with you.
Anything goes.
Yeah.
Which is quite good.
Speaking of that, and we're getting to the end of our time together, do you have anything that you might want to impart to students that may be listening to this broadcast in terms of something they should be aware of or thinking about?
Yes, they should look at books. They should look at books, and they should go to museums and look at the past. I'm absolutely amazed by the number of young people who have no idea of anything in the past at all.
Wow.
All they do is they look at things online and they look at things made now, and they think 1970 is a long time ago. I mean, obviously I'm an old man, you know. Not that old, I'm 54, but I'm old enough to remember 1970 only too well, you know, whereas young people today, obviously, it's, you know, their parents' time.
Yes.
But I do find it shocking that people cannot tell the difference. Designers cannot tell the difference between the Renaissance and the 18th century and Victorian times and ancient Greece. And it's really all just old for them. And I think there is so much fascination in, you know, historical styles and historical influences, and there's so much potential.
I'm seeing it already. We've mentioned it earlier in the interview that how you've combined the two with present day, your present day feelings and thoughts and designs, and that's great advice for them to get out and start looking at this and reading looking at books.
Yes, opening books, because young people simply don't open books. They look at a book and they're like, okay, that's going to sit there. I'm going to look at stuff on my phone because that just looks frightening.
Agreed. Well, Ashley, thank you so much. I know you've got to go to another location, and I appreciate your time immensely. Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you and talk with you today. Thanks for being here.
Well, you too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Design Between the Lines is produced by Element Studio with the American Society of Furniture Designers. We're recorded in High Point, North Carolina. To find videos of these podcasts, be sure to subscribe to the American Society of Furniture Designers YouTube channel. To learn more about ASFD, visit asfd.com. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more industry stories of design between the lines.